Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship, staring at the empty space where Earth used to be. 3,000 years had passed since he last saw this place. 3,000 years since his people had called this solar system home. Bridge was quiet. His crew worked at their stations without speaking. They all knew what they were looking at. Where their home planet should have been, there was only scattered rocks floating in the dark. Broken pieces of what was once a beautiful blue world. "Report," Morrison said to his navigation officer. Lisa Hayes looked up from her console. Her face was calm, but Morrison could see the anger in her eyes. 12 ships in our fleet, all systems working perfectly. We are now in the outer edge of the Sol system. No sign that anyone has noticed us yet, Morrison nodded. Their ships were built with technology that made them nearly invisible. The aliens who destroyed Earth would not see them coming until it was too late. What about the alien presence? Morrison asked. Hayes touched her screen, and numbers appeared in the air above her console. Heavy alien activity throughout the system, sir. They have turned Jupiter into a massive shipyard. Thousands of their warships are being built there. Mars has been changed, too. They made it into their command center for this region. Morrison walked closer to the big window at the front of the bridge. In the distance, he could see lights where Mars should be. The red planet now glowed with alien cities and military bases. Billions of the reptilian creatures called Zephyrians now lived on the world where humans had once dreamed of building colonies. "How many of them are there?" Morrison asked. "Our scans show at least 50 billion Zephyrians in this system alone." Hayes replied, "They have been using our former home as their main base for expanding into other parts of the galaxy." Morrison's hands formed fists at his sides. 50 billion aliens living in the place where 10 billion humans had once lived, loved, and died. The creatures who had turned Earth into floating rocks now called this place their own. Lieutenant Commander Ben Clark stepped up beside Morrison. Clark was younger than Morrison, born on one of the hidden human colonies far from Earth. He had never seen the home world, but he had grown up hearing stories about it. "Sir, we are receiving signals from the other human fleets," Clark said. "All 37 colony groups have ships in position around the galaxy. They are waiting for your order." Morrison smiled for the first time in months. 37 different human colonies, each one hidden in the dark spaces between stars. Each one had spent 3,000 years preparing for this day. Each one had built weapons and ships that the Zephyrians could not imagine. "Send them this message," Morrison said. "Tell them it is time to come home." Clark nodded and moved to his communication station. Within minutes, the message would reach human fleets across the galaxy. Ships that had been hiding in asteroid fields and behind dead planets would begin moving toward Zephyrian worlds. The long wait was finally over. On the other side of the bridge, Science Officer Katie Brooks was studying her screens carefully. She had been monitoring Zephyrian communications since they arrived. "Commander," Brooks called out, "the aliens have detected our ships." Morrison turned to look at her. "What is their response?" "They are treating us as a minor threat," Brooks said. "Their military commander here is someone called Admiral Korth Var. He has ordered just one patrol group to investigate us. 20 ships." Morrison almost laughed. 20 ships to deal with what they thought was a small human scouting force. The Zephyrians had no idea what humanity had become during their long exile. "They think we are still the same weak species they destroyed 3,000 years ago," Clark said. "Let them think that," Morrison replied. "It will make our job easier." Dr. Alex Coleman, the fleet's chief scientist, looked up from his station. "Commander, the special devices are ready. All of them have been in position for over a century, waiting for this moment." Morrison nodded. The special devices were humanity's secret weapon, built over many generations and hidden throughout Zephyrian space. When activated, they would show The aliens exactly how much humans had learned during their time away from home. Not yet, Doctor, Morrison said. First, we test their defenses. We need to see how strong they really are. The Zephyrian patrol ships were moving toward them now. Morrison could see them on the long-range scanners. They moved in the same formations their ancestors had used 3,000 years ago. They had grown comfortable in their power, never expecting that their victims might return stronger than... Before Captain Ryan Torres, Morrison's tactical officer, stepped forward. Torres was one of the few humans old enough to remember the stories told by the original survivors. His great-grandmother had been on one of the ships that escaped Earth's destruction. Sir, the Zephyrian patrol will reach us in 2 hours, Torres said. Should we prepare for battle? Morrison looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. These were not the desperate refugees who had fled Earth's destruction. These were the descendants of those refugees, trained from birth to be warriors. They had spent their entire lives preparing to take back what was stolen from their ancestors. No, Morrison said quietly. We do not prepare for battle. We prepare for justice. The Zephyrian ships came closer, their weapons charging for what? They expected to be an easy fight. But they were about to discover that humanity was no longer the weak species they remembered. 3,000 years of anger, 3,000 years of planning, and 3,000 years of building better weapons were about to be unleashed on the creatures who had destroyed Earth. Morrison touched a button on his command chair. Throughout the ship, warning lights began to flash. The crew moved to their battle stations with smooth efficiency. Every person on board knew their job perfectly. The war for Earth was about to begin. Captain Ryan Torres walked through the ship's memory vault, a place where humanity kept the records of what happened 3,000 years ago. The walls were covered with screens, showing images from the past. Pictures of Earth when it was still, green and blue. Videos of humans living their normal lives before the aliens came. Torres stopped in front of a large screen that showed Earth's final day. He had watched this recording hundreds of times, but it still made his heart heavy. The young officers behind him had never seen it before. They needed to understand why they were here. This is what happened on March 15th, 2087, Torres said to the group of junior officers. Earth time. Our home world had 10 billion people living on it. They were just beginning to explore space. Small colonies on Mars and Luna were humanity's first steps toward the stars. The screen showed Earth from space, looking peaceful and beautiful. White clouds moved over blue oceans and green continents. Space stations orbited around the planet like tiny dots of light. Lieutenant Danny Wright, one of the youngest officers in the fleet, stepped closer to the screen. It looks so alive, he said quietly. It was alive, Torres replied. More alive than any world we have found since then. Then the Zephyrians arrived. The peaceful image on the screen suddenly changed. Dark shapes appeared at the edge of the solar system. Hundreds of alien warships, each one larger than anything humans had ever built. They moved toward Earth like a black cloud of death. The Zephyrians came without warning, Torres continued. They did not try to talk to us. They did not ask us to surrender. They simply began destroying everything they found. The screen showed the first moments of the attack. Bright beams of energy shot down from the alien ships, hitting Earth's cities. Where the beams touched, everything turned to fire and smoke. Millions of people died in the first few minutes. Why did they attack us? Asked Lieutenant Julie Parker, another young officer. What did we do to them? Torres touched the screen and brought up a recording made by the Zephyrian fleet commander. The alien's voice was cold and emotionless as he spoke to his ships. Sector 7739 contains a developing species that has begun expanding beyond their home planet. Standard procedure requires complete elimination to prevent future competition for resources. Begin planetary sterilization. The young officers stared at the screen in shock. They had heard the stories, but seeing the actual recording made it real. The aliens had killed 10 billion humans not because of hatred or fear, but simply because they did not want competition. To them, we were nothing more than insects, Torres said. Something to be stepped on before we became a problem. The recording continued, showing Earth's desperate final battle. Human ships, tiny compared to the alien vessels, fought bravely but uselessly. The planet's defense systems fired everything they had, but their weapons could not even scratch the Zephyrian shields. The battle lasted 6 hours, Torres said. Then Earth was gone. The screen showed the moment when the alien weapons hit Earth's core. The planet cracked like an egg, its pieces flying apart into space. Where a world full of life had once been, only burning rocks remained. Wright turned away from the screen, his face pale. How did anyone survive? Torres smiled sadly and brought up a new image. It showed a small space station far from Earth, hidden behind Jupiter's largest moon. The station was called Endeavour, and it was humanity's deep space research facility. Dr. Amanda Foster was in charge of the Endeavour station, Torres said. She saw what was happening to Earth and knew that humanity would die unless someone acted quickly. The screen showed Dr. Foster, a middle-aged woman with determined eyes, working frantically at her computers. Around her, other scientists helped prepare the station's small fleet of ships for an impossible mission. Foster had 12 ships and could carry maybe 3,000 people total, Torres continued. But she also had something else: the complete genetic records of the human race stored in the station's computers. The young officers watched as the small human ships left the station and spread out across space. Each one carried a few hundred survivors and a copy of humanity's genetic information. They flew in different directions, heading for the dark spaces between stars where the aliens would not find them. The Zephyrians thought they had killed all of us, Torres said. They did not bother to look for survivors. That was their mistake. Lieutenant. Parker raised her hand. What happened to the survivors? How did we become so strong? Torres brought up a new set of images showing the long years after Earth's destruction. The screen showed human ships landing on dead worlds and hidden asteroids. Small groups of people building secret bases in places where no one would think to look. The survivors scattered across the galaxy, Torres said. But they did not just hide. They learned. They met other species that had been destroyed by the Zephyrians. Each fallen race taught humanity something new. The screen showed humans working alongside strange alien creatures, crystal beings that could manipulate energy, machine races that knew the secrets of advanced technology, gas creatures that understood how to bend space and time. Every species the Zephyrians destroyed left behind knowledge, Torres continued, and humanity learned from all of them. We spent 3,000 years becoming something the aliens could never imagine. Wright looked at the current images of human ships and weapons. Is that how we got so advanced? Part of it, Torres replied. But the most important thing we learned was patience. The Zephyrians expected their enemies to attack quickly, while the anger was still fresh. They never expected anyone to wait 3,000 years for revenge. Torres brought up one final image. It showed a young human child in one of the hidden colonies, listening to an elder tell the story of Earth's destruction. The child's eyes were full of determination and controlled anger. Every human child born in the last 3,000 years grew up knowing this story, Torres said. Every generation was raised with one purpose: to make sure that humanity would survive and that the Zephyrians would pay for what they did. The young officers stood quietly for a moment, absorbing what they had learned. They now understood why. They were here and what they were fighting for. The Zephyrians think we are still the same weak species they destroyed, Torres said. They are about to learn how wrong they are. Commander Morrison stood at the bridge window, looking at the distant lights where Pluto used to orbit. The small planet was gone now, replaced by a massive Zephyrian military station. 50 alien warships patrolled around it like guard dogs protecting their territory. That station has been there for over 2,000 years, said Science Officer Katie Brooks. Our scans show it has heavy shields and enough weapons to destroy a small fleet. Morrison nodded slowly. The station would be perfect for their first test. Not important enough to bring the entire Zephyrian fleet running, but strong enough to show what their enemies could do. Captain Wright, Morrison called out, take the Retribution and 2 escort ships. I want you to destroy that station. Captain Danny Wright looked surprised. Sir, 3 ships against 50? Are you sure that's enough? Morrison smiled. More than enough. This is not about winning a fair fight, Captain. This is about showing the Zephyrians what we have learned. Wright saluted and left the bridge. Within minutes, 3 human ships separated from the main fleet and moved toward the alien station. They looked small and fragile compared to the massive Zephyrian vessels waiting for them. On the bridge of the Retribution, Captain Wright watched his enemy through the main screen. The Zephyrian ships were large and covered with weapons. They moved in perfect formation, just like their ancestors had done 3,000 years ago. All stations report ready, said Lieutenant Carl Stevens, Wright's second in command. Weapons are charged and shields are up. Wright nodded. Remember, we are not just fighting for ourselves today. We are fighting for every human who died when Earth burned. The Zephyrian commander saw the approaching human ships and laughed. 3 tiny vessels against his entire battle group. It would be over in minutes. All ships, attack formation, the Zephyrian ordered. Destroy the human insects quickly. I want to be back at the station in time for my meal. The alien ships moved forward, their plasma cannons charging with deadly energy. They had used these same weapons to destroy hundreds of worlds over the centuries. No enemy had ever survived their focused fire. But as the first plasma beams shot toward the human ships, something impossible happened. The energy passed right through the Retribution, as if it was not there at all. What? The Zephyrian commander hissed. How did they do that? Wright smiled as he watched the confused aliens fire again and again at his ship. Their weapons could not touch him. Humanity had learned to shift their ships slightly out of normal space, making them impossible to hit with conventional weapons. Our turn, Wright said calmly. The Retribution fired its main weapon, a beam of pure energy that bent and twisted through space. The beam hit the leading Zephyrian ship and passed through its shields like they were made of paper. The alien vessel exploded in a ball of fire. Impossible, the Zephyrian commander gasped. Our shields are impenetrable. But more human weapons fired, each one using technology the aliens had never seen. Temporal mines appeared around 3 Zephyrian ships, freezing them in time loops where they would be trapped forever. Gravity bombs crushed 2 more vessels into tiny metal balls. The Zephyrian commander tried to retreat, but it was too late. In less than 10 minutes, his entire fleet of 50 ships was destroyed. The human vessels had not even been scratched. Back on Morrison's flagship, the crew watched the battle through their sensors. What should have been a desperate fight had become a one-sided slaughter. Report from Captain Wright, said Lieutenant. Commander Clark, all enemy ships destroyed. No damage to our vessels. The station is also destroyed. Morrison felt a grim satisfaction. After 3,000 years, humanity had finally struck back at their enemies. But this was only the beginning. On Mars, Admiral Korthvar received the panicked reports from the battle. His communication officer, A young Zephyrian named Sector could barely speak. "Admiral, the reports from Pluto Station make no sense," Sector said. "The survivors claim the human ships could not be hit by our weapons. They say the humans had technology that bends reality itself." Korthvar slammed his clawed fist on his desk. "Nonsense. Humans are weak creatures. We destroyed their entire species 3,000 years ago. These must be just a few survivors in old ships." But privately, the Admiral was worried. His ancestors had taught him that humans were primitive and helpless. The battle reports suggested something very different. "Send a message to all stations," Korthvar ordered. "Double the guard patrols, and find out where these humans came from." Meanwhile, Dr. Alex Coleman worked quietly in his laboratory aboard Morrison's ship. Around him, complex machines hummed with barely contained energy. For 3,000 years, humanity had been placing special devices throughout Zephyrian space, hidden in asteroids, buried on dead planets, floating in empty space where no one would look. Coleman looked at his control panel and smiled. Thousands of red lights showed the locations of the devices. Each one was a weapon capable of destroying an entire star system. Humanity had spent centuries building them and getting them into position. "Not yet," Coleman whispered to himself. "But soon." On the bridge, Morrison received reports from human fleets across the galaxy. Every group had witnessed the battle through their long-range sensors. The message was clear. Humanity was ready to fight. "Sir," said Hayes from our navigation station, "we are receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian command on Mars. Admiral Korthvar wants to speak with you." Morrison considered this. The alien commander probably wanted to negotiate or make threats. But Morrison was not interested in talk. "Ignore it," Morrison said. "We have nothing to say to them yet." Captain Wright returned to the flagship with his 3 ships. As he entered the bridge, the crew applauded. It was the first human victory over the Zephyrians in 3,000 years. "Well done, Captain," Morrison said. "What did you learn about their defenses?" Wright looked thoughtful. "They are strong, but they rely on old tactics. They expect their enemies to fight like the species they destroyed long ago. They have no idea how to deal with our new weapons." Morrison nodded. That was exactly what he had hoped to hear. The Zephyrians were powerful, but they had grown lazy and predictable during their long reign. "Prepare the fleet," Morrison ordered. "It's time to show them what real war looks like." Across the bridge, every officer smiled. The test was over, and humanity had passed with perfect marks. Now the real battle could begin. The space around the Sol system suddenly filled with light as thousands of human ships appeared from nowhere. They had been invisible, hiding in the dark between planets, waiting for this moment. Now they showed themselves in all their deadly beauty. Commander Morrison stood on his bridge and watched as ship after ship materialized around him. Each vessel represented a different human colony that had spent 3,000 years preparing for war. The fleet stretched as far as his sensors could reach. "All ships report ready for battle," said Lieutenant Commander Clark. 37. Colony fleets, total of 8,000 ships. Every weapon system is charged and waiting for your command. Morrison opened a communication channel that would reach every Zephyrian installation in the Sol system. His voice was calm and cold as he spoke. "Attention, Zephyrians. 3,000 years ago, you destroyed our home and killed our people. Today, we have returned. Surrender now, or face the consequences of your actions." On Mars, Admiral Korthvar stared at his screens in shock. Where moments before there had been empty space, now thousands of enemy ships surrounded his bases. His communication officer was screaming numbers at him, but the Admiral could barely hear. 8,000 ships, sir, all of unknown design. They are demanding our surrender." Korthvar felt fear creep into his hearts. This was impossible. Humans were extinct. His ancestors had made sure of that, but the evidence was right in front. Of him, all fleets attack formation, Korthvar ordered. Destroy the human ships. Show them why the Zephyrian Empire rules the galaxy. The Zephyrian response was massive. 3,000 warships launched from bases throughout the system. Orbital. Weapons platforms powered up their main guns. For a moment, it looked like the aliens might have a chance. Then the human fleet moved. General Carl Stevens led the assault on Mars from his command ship Vengeance. Behind him flew 500 vessels, filled with human soldiers whose families had been killed defending Earth. They had trained their entire lives for this battle. All ships begin planetary assault, Stevens ordered. Remember, we are not just soldiers today. We are the ghosts of Earth, come to collect what is owed. The human ships dove toward Mars like falling stars. Zephyrian defense platforms fired. Everything they had, but the human vessels simply phased through the energy beams. Their shields bent space itself, making them nearly impossible to hit. Stevens watched as his assault troops landed on the Martian surface. The human soldiers moved. Like liquid shadow, their enhanced bodies allowing them to survive in any environment. They could breathe in space, walk through solid walls, and fight for days without rest. The Zephyrian defenders fought bravely, but they were facing an enemy beyond their understanding. Human soldiers appeared inside their bunkers without warning. Weapons that should have killed the attackers passed harmlessly through their bodies. Sector 7 is secured, reported Captain Pete Davis over the radio. Zephyrian Command Center is under our control. Minimal human casualties. Sector 12 clear, came another voice. Enemy forces are retreating toward the northern cities. Within 6 hours, Mars was in human hands. The red planet that had been turned into a Zephyrian fortress became humanity's first reclaimed world. At Jupiter, Chief Engineer Marie Lopez led a different kind of assault. Her target was the massive shipyard where the Zephyrians had been building their fleet for over a millennium. Thousands of alien warships hung in space, some complete, others still under construction. Engineering teams, begin sabotage operations, Lopez commanded. I want every ship in this yard destroyed. Leave nothing for them to use against us. Lopez's teams moved through the shipyard like ghosts. They wore special suits that let them survive in the vacuum of space and made them invisible to Zephyrian. Sensors. Each team carried weapons that could rewrite the basic structure of matter itself. The sabotage was swift and thorough. Human engineers planted devices that turned the metal of the alien ships into harmless gas. Weapons systems dissolved into nothing. Within hours, 3,000 years of Zephyrian naval construction was gone. Jupiter shipyard neutralized, Lopez reported to Morrison. All enemy vessels destroyed. The yard itself is beyond repair. Morrison smiled grimly. 2 major Zephyrian strongholds had fallen in less than a day. But the real test was still coming. Dr. Alex Coleman stood in his laboratory, his hand hovering over a large red button. Around him, screens showed Zephyrian worlds across the galaxy. For 3,000 years, humanity had been secretly placing devices near these worlds, waiting for this moment. Dr. Coleman, Morrison's voice came through the intercom. Are you ready? Coleman nodded, even though Morrison could not see him. All devices are in position, Commander, covering every major Zephyrian world and military base. When activated, they will destabilize the stars themselves. Begin activation, Morrison ordered. Coleman pressed the button. Across the galaxy, ancient devices hidden in asteroids and space debris suddenly came to life. They had been built by humans who died centuries ago, but their purpose was clear. Each device began sending specific energy patterns toward nearby stars. On the Zephyrian homeworld of Zeph Prime, astronomers noticed their sun beginning to flicker. The star that had burned steadily for billions of years was starting to become unstable. Massive solar flares erupted from its surface, sending deadly radiation toward the planet. Similar scenes played out on hundreds of Zephyrian worlds. Their suns began to die, poisoned by humanity's patient revenge. Some worlds had days to evacuate. Others had only hours. Emperor Kreshmor, the supreme ruler of the Zephyrian Empire, watched in horror as reports came in from across his domain. World after world was reporting the same thing. Their stars were dying. "How is this possible?" the Emperor demanded. "Who has this kind of power?" His science advisor, an old Zephyrian named Veltar, studied the readings with shaking hands. "My Lord, these energy signatures are not natural. Someone is deliberately killing our sons. But the technology required would take thousands of years to develop and place." The Emperor felt cold fear in his belly. "The humans," he whispered. "The species we destroyed, they have returned." Back in the Sol system, Morrison received reports from human fleets throughout the galaxy. The simultaneous attack was working perfectly. Zephyrian forces were in chaos, trying to deal with threats on 1,000 different fronts. "Status report," Morrison ordered. "Sol system is completely under our control," reported Clark. "Mars and Jupiter have fallen. The remaining Zephyrian forces are in full retreat. Galaxy-wide operations are proceeding as planned," added Brooks. "Zephyrian Empire is collapsing on all fronts. Their subject races are beginning to rebel." Morrison looked out at the space where Earth had once been. Soon he would begin the process of rebuilding his people's home. But first there was one more task to complete. "Prepare my personal ship," Morrison told Clark. "It's time to have a conversation with Admiral Korthvar, face to face." Commander Morrison walked through the ruins of the Zephyrian Command Center on Mars. The walls were cracked and smoking from the battle. Broken alien computers sparked and hissed around him. In the center of the destroyed room, Admiral Korthvar sat chained to a chair. The Zephyrian admiral looked older than Morrison had expected. His reptilian skin was dull and scarred from many battles, but his yellow eyes still burned with hatred as Morrison approached. "So you are the human commander," Korthvar hissed. "You look just like the weak creatures my ancestors destroyed. How did your pathetic species become so powerful?" Morrison pulled up a chair and sat down across from the alien. Between them lay 3,000 years of pain and anger. Morrison's voice was calm when he spoke. "You want to know how we became strong?" Morrison said. "It's simple. You taught us." Korthvar's eyes narrowed with confusion. "What do you mean?" "When you destroyed Earth, you made a choice," Morrison explained. "You decided that might makes right, that the strong can do whatever they want to the weak. We learned that lesson very well." Morrison activated a small device that projected images in the air between them. The pictures showed human colonies scattered across the galaxy. Children growing up on hidden worlds, learning to fight and build better weapons. Every human child, born in the last 3,000 years, grew up knowing one thing, Morrison continued, that someday we would face you again. And when that day came, we would be ready. The alien admiral laughed bitterly. "Ready? You were insects then, and you are insects now. We ruled 1,000 worlds while you hid in the dark." "Yes, you ruled." Morrison agreed. "You conquered and destroyed and called it strength, but you never learned the most important lesson of all." "Which is?" Morrison's eyes grew cold. "That true strength is not about destroying your enemies quickly. It's about being patient enough to outlast them." The images changed to show Zephyrian worlds across the galaxy. Many are empty now, their populations evacuated as their sons died. Others were burning as rebellions broke out among the species. The Zephyrians had conquered. "Your empire is falling apart," Morrison said. Not because we destroyed it in battle, but because we showed everyone else that you could be beaten. Every species you enslaved is now fighting for freedom. Captain Julie Parker entered the room and saluted Morrison. Sir, reports from across the galaxy are coming in. The Zephyrian homeworld has been evacuated. Their government is requesting terms for surrender. Morrison nodded but did not take his eyes off Korthvar. What terms are they offering? Complete withdrawal from all conquered territories, Parker replied. They are willing to return to their original star system and never expand again. Korthvar looked shocked. Impossible. The Empire has never surrendered to anyone. The Empire no longer exists, Morrison said simply. Your people are now refugees, just like humans were 3,000 years ago. The alien admiral struggled against his chains. If you are going to kill us, then do it. Do not torture us with false hope. Morrison stood up and walked to the broken window. Outside, human ships filled the Martian sky. In the distance, he could see the construction crews, already beginning to rebuild the planet's surface. We are not going to kill you, Morrison said quietly. Korthvar stared at him in disbelief. What? 3,000 years ago, your people showed humanity exactly what they thought mercy meant? Morrison explained. Nothing. You gave us no chance to surrender, no opportunity to live peacefully. You simply destroyed everything we had built. Morrison turned back to face the alien. But we are not you. We learned something during our exile that your species never understood. Real strength is knowing when not to use your power. Dr. Susan Foster, the great-great-granddaughter of the woman who had saved humanity, entered the room carrying a data pad. She looked at Korthvar with curious eyes rather than hatred. The Earth Restoration Project is ready to begin, she told Morrison. We can start rebuilding the planet immediately. Morrison smiled. How long will it take? About 500 years to restore the basic structure, Foster replied. Another 300 to bring back the oceans and atmosphere. It will be slow work, but Earth will be green and blue again. Korthvar watched this exchange with growing confusion. You are rebuilding your world? But why not just take one of ours? Morrison looked at him with something that might have been pity. Because taking your worlds would make us just like you. We are better than that. The alien admiral was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, smaller. What will happen to my people? The same thing that happened to us, Morrison replied. You will scatter across the galaxy as refugees. You will have to find new worlds to live on. Some of you will survive. Some will not. That is not mercy. Korthvar said bitterly. No, Morrison agreed. It is justice. You will get exactly what you gave us. The chance to survive if you are strong enough and smart enough to earn it. Morrison walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back. There is one difference, though. If your people truly change, if they learn to live peacefully with others, we will not hunt you down. Your children might have a chance at a better life. And if we do not change? Morrison's voice grew hard again. Then your species will join. All the others you destroyed. The choice is yours. Outside the command center, Morrison met with his senior officers. The war was over, but there was still much work to do. Captain Wright approached with a final report. All Zephyrian military forces have surrendered or been destroyed, Wright said. Their refugee fleets are moving toward the galaxy's outer rim. Most of their former subjects have declared independence. Morrison nodded. And our losses? Minimal, Wright replied. Less than 1,000 casualties across all fleets. The technological advantage was even greater than we hoped. Morrison looked up at the Martian sky, where Earth's restoration ships were already moving toward the asteroid field that had once been home. Soon, the work of rebuilding would begin. But it would not be the same Earth that was destroyed. It would be something new, built by people who had learned hard lessons about survival and strength. Send a message to all human colonies, Morrison ordered. Tell them the war is over. Tell them it's time to come home. As the years passed, Earth slowly took shape again. Piece by piece, the scattered rocks were gathered and reformed into a living world. The blue oceans returned, filled with life from 1,000 different worlds. Green forests grew where cities had once stood, and in the darkness between stars, scattered groups of Zephyrians tried to build new lives far from the worlds they had once ruled. Some learned to live peacefully. Others continued their old ways and found themselves facing other enemies who had learned humanity's lessons about patience and strength. Morrison, now an old man, stood on the surface of the new Earth and watched. His grandchildren play in gardens that grew where his ancestors had died. The long exile was over. Humanity had come home, not as conquerors, but as something better than what they had lost. The galaxy was a different place now, one where strength was measured not by how quickly you could destroy your enemies, but by how long you could wait for justice to arrive.